Hello, folks. Today I am all kinds of frustrated because I cannot find my copy of The Rational Male Volume 2, and I was really hoping to use that for this video. I got bored really quickly with Rational Male Volume 2 because a lot of it seemed to be just a reiteration of Volume 1. The only part that really caught my attention, and granted I haven't finished the book, so for all I know he's going to do this again later, which is supply new information, which is always quite interesting and tantalizing. But the thing about Rational Male Volume 2 that I did find quite interesting was his timeline of women's sexual development. I can't remember what he called it. I think there were graphs involved. Those were kind of pretty. And definitely kind of fun. I thought it was interesting to follow the timeline of a lot of women as they progress through their sexuality. So, they reach maturity or reach, sexual maturity, and they immediately, are encountering like all this positive attention, and it's positive sexual attention. So they enter into the party years and all this wonderful stuff. And then they kind of have to deal with the descent that follows. I really wanted to look at his timeline because I am 35, and it's like, okay, the first time I read the timeline, I was like, well, this is interesting, but this just doesn't seem to be me. Like, I see how a lot of women fall into these traps and these pitfalls, but I'm not there. I'm not falling for this. And so now, now I'm looking at it, and there are a lot of things that I have not talked about. I switched jobs too, and the reason was because of scheduling difficulties with my family, because I never got to see them, and my relationship with my husband has been suffering. In fact, my relationship with my husband has been suffering in a more general sense for almost a year now. And that's kind of why I wanted to talk about this. We've been struggling. No, we haven't. I've been struggling ever since I found out about the brain tumor. I think that's what really did it. I was struggling before, but the brain tumor is what really, really did it. And so that's why I wanted to talk about it, because, a lot of women, they leave their husbands. They run away from their husbands. A lot of women, they settle for Mr. Nice Guy, then find out that he's boring and unexciting, and then they want somebody who's new and fresh. And I can't remember where on the timeline that happens, so I really wish I had a copy of that graph. But I don't at the moment, so I'm going to have to just go from memory and hope that I get this and know that I'm not getting the years or the ages particularly right. I didn't do any of that. I didn't do that, and so when I read the timeline, it was like, oh, this really sucks for these other women, but that's not me. I do have a tendency to go into denial about my problems, and I have caught myself now on multiple occasions going into denial about problems that I've had, so I know that I do it. And I try really hard to be realistic about, okay, am I being in denial right now? Or am I really genuinely just not having a problem with this thing? And I think I'm getting pretty decent at catching myself. Obviously, everybody has, their moments where they're a little bit oblivious to the nuances of their own psychology, which is why people go to therapists in the first place. There are going to be things about yourself that you don't necessarily see. Speaking of which, I went to therapy yesterday, and that's probably why I burst into tears this morning. I'm struggling. I'm struggling with a whole lot. There's a lot going on. I finally got frustrated and sat down today and wrote it all down in a list, and I was like, I bet this list is going to be as long as my arm. And it was 5 items. It was 5 little items on the list, and it wasn't that big a deal, it seemed like, except that each of those 5 items would be something that'd be kind of world-rocking for most people. Like, you encounter any one of those 5 items, it's like, well, you got some problems in your life. And it's like, I've got 5 of them. I got some problems in my life, and that's okay. I'm coping. And the wonderful thing is my husband has been amazing throughout all of this. I got diagnosed with bipolar. That's item number 1 in the list. It's like, congratulations, you have bipolar disorder. You have problems in your life. One of our kids is sick. They're not developing properly, and so we've been to an endocrinologist. We've been to a geneticist. We're trying to get the kind of care that he needs. So that's happening. And it's just another thing in the background. We're gonna face whatever comes as it comes, and we're gonna try and it's really, really nice. We're getting a physical therapist for him so he can develop a little bit more normally until we figure out what's going on with him. But every doctor who's seen him says that he seems very mentally healthy and mentally well developed for his age. So that's really important to us, and that's a really reassuring thing. Like, that's not a guarantee. There could be something mental going on as well, but anyway. So that's been going on. That's another problem. Obviously, the brain tumor is still causing issues, and the brain tumor is the big one because that has been causing issues in our marriage for the last year. In fact, it's been causing issues for far more than a year, and that's why I wanted to look at Rollo Tomasi's timeline, because if I recall correctly, here's the way it works for a lot of women. Not all women, and this is the very important thing that I want you guys to remember. Not all women are like this. And you're probably saying, oh, there's the Nawald argument, but this is the important piece. This is the nugget that is going to make this information useful to you. Not all women are going to be like this. So you have to find the women who are not going to make foolish decisions with their lives, or if they do start making foolish decisions in their lives, manage to correct themselves and, kind of get into a better place in life, as opposed to just kind of blindly following instinct. The timeline as I see it now and as I look at it, yes, there's the hypergamous instinct. There's the lizard brain. Like, there's the part of your mind that pulls you in this general direction, and you're likely to follow that general direction. But just because you're prone to going in that general direction, there's a lot of other things that can happen in your life that are going to bump you off that path. And having any level of self-awareness is automatically going to take you off that path. Because anybody who's sitting there and looking at their life and saying, where do I want to go in life? They're not going to want to go down that road. It's a really, really depressing road. And just to do a quick recap again, I don't have the diagram, which I am kicking myself for because it should be on the bookshelf. I don't know where I put it. You start off as a woman, young, beautiful, lots of male attention, lots of sexual attention. Immediately we're going into the party years. The party years last for a little while, a couple of years of just good times. And I remember those times because I'm over my party years. I remember those times. They were fun. And then you start going back down again. You hit about, I think, 28-ish, and you hit the wall and you realize, you know what? Those party years, they're coming to an end. And I mean, I remember 30. 30 happened to me. 30 happens to everybody. It's like, oh my God, I'm not as young and pretty as I used to be. I was, for me it was different because I'd already hit all these milestones by the time I hit 28. But for a lot of women, what happens is, oh my God, I'm almost 30. I should have found Mr. Right by now. I should be married by now. We should have a house by now and at least one kid. And oh my God, what have I been doing? And then they start scrambling to find Mr. Right because they realize I'm 28. Pretty soon I'm going to be 30. I'm not going to be, I'm not going to be a fresh spring flower anymore. They might realize this subconsciously. A lot of women say it's a biological clock. Tomasi's argument is that it's not a biological clock because your biological clock really is screaming at you to have offspring right at the peak of those party years when you're in your early-ish, mid-ish 20s. And that's how I interpreted it. It's like, I've got a massive sex drive. What is my body telling me? Well, you should probably get pregnant. And that's a scary thought, but that's what your sex drive frequently is telling you, male or female. Males, it's usually you should get as many things pregnant as possible, just stick it in everything. Women, it's usually find someone really, really, really awesome who's going to stick with you, but then get pregnant with them. And that priority shift that occurs when you're like, find someone really, really awesome and sexy to, ooh, but you want them to stick around with you. That's the alpha beta argument. We're not going to get into that today. So the 30s is the wall hitting period, early 30s, late 20s actually, 28-ish. You hit the wall. Oh my God, I need to find Mr. Right. I need to settle down. I need to, I need to do all these milestones in my life. And so a lot of women, 28-ish, they start frantically scrambling around for Mr. Exciting Alpha and Sexy Alpha, who is also Mr. Gonna stay at home and not go out partying wildly every night without you, gonna help you raise the kids, gonna help you pay the bills, gonna stick around and be loyal, which are I know a lot of guys conceptualize those as beta traits, and then they conceptualize those as somehow weak or inferior traits. Women want both. I keep saying this. I will insist this. Until the end of time. I know that a lot of guys look at it and say, no, women just want alpha. That's what drives them. No, we want both. We really want both. We want to have it all. Women want to have their cake, and they want to eat that cake too. You need both. You need a little bit of both to be what women really, really want. I hate YouTubers who keep on repeating things again and again, video after video, but this is one of those things I'm going to repeat. Sorry. Anyway, moving on. She scrambles after Mr. Right. She's looking for Mr. Exciting, but she's also feeling an increasing need to prioritize Mr. Beta. Mr. gonna stick around, Mr. gonna help to pay the bills. And so she ends up settling for a guy who's a little bit more on the beta side of the spectrum and a little bit less on the alpha side of the spectrum. He's not as exciting, he's not as fun, and I've seen this happen with women. And I remember being 18 and seeing it for the very first time and being just completely blown out of my mind, like, oh my god, what the fuck? Because I didn't really know what to make of it, because I was 18, you know? And I was a very sheltered 18-year-old, so I had never kissed a boy. I mean, it was one of those things, you'll date when you get older. And for me in particular, when I say I was sheltered, everybody's like, yeah, no, you were a normal girl. No, I wasn't a normal girl. I was a bipolar girl who was going into euphoric states and living in this beautiful, happy dreamland where, you know, there were no boys. So the idea of dating, it just didn't occur to me. And so, you know, I turned 18, which is when my parents said, okay, now you can start dating boys because you're legal and adult, whatever. Sheltered. I did say I was sheltered. So, you know, I was going to find Mr. Right at some point in time. I figured he was just going to kind of appear magically on his own, and I didn't have to worry about it too much, and that was all going to happen later, you know. And in the meantime, I was just dealing with my happy little euphorias, and then I met this woman. And she was like, you know, she was telling me about how, you know, she used to be such a party girl when she was younger. She used to go out and she used to party and she used to have fun and she used to go drinking and, you know, she did some drugs and it was all cool and it was all wonderful. But then she met her husband and he just wasn't like the other guys. Does that sound familiar, folks? He just wasn't like the other guys. And he was a nice guy, you know? He was the kind of guy she could see herself settling down with and spending a lifetime with. And, you know, he liked to stay at home and he liked to cuddle on the couch and watch a movie. And he seemed like such a solid guy. So she married him because that's what you're supposed to do, right? And then she hit 33 and all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, I'm so fucking bored. And at that point, she was like, well, I have the kids, and I regret the kids. And I have the husband, and I regret the husband. And I really just want to run away from it all and go have a party again. And I thought, oh my God, you're a horrible person. Because, I mean, 18-year-old me, super sheltered, just didn't know any better. This was Tomasi's timeline. And so one of the things that I have been, like, going through unspoken levels of stress about lately is, here's how I fit into the timeline. I think I've figured it out a little bit, but not entirely. So I'm trying to put it all into words and piece it all together and hand it to you guys because I think this might actually help some of you out. Now that we're 14 minutes into the video, I gotta pare this down a little bit. But and now that we're about 14 minutes into the video, here's where the fun stuff starts. So for me, my timeline, I didn't hit the wall. I didn't settle for Mr. Beta Guy. I was 23 and I met this amazing man, and he was everything I ever could have dreamed of in a guy. Like, he was my dream guy. He was the first guy I ever dated who had a six-pack, and I didn't know that until our first date. Like, I didn't know that until I was already very excited about him. And then he took his shirt off and it was like, oh my God, this is for me? Oh, wow. He was handsome and he was smart and he was fun to talk to and he was interesting and he was exciting, but he also was really good with small animals and wanted to get married and wanted to have kids with me. And it was like, I didn't think guys like that existed, but there I was at 23 and there he was, and he was everything I wanted. And somehow I don't entirely know how, but by some miracle, I actually convinced this amazing, hot, alpha dude to marry me and to stay with me and to have kids with me. And that's what we did. And it was wonderful. I got the happily ever after that so many women never find. And it was really cool. You know, we got married and we decided to start having children because we knew that I wasn't going to be young and fertile for forever. And so I said, okay, well, goodbye to the tail end of my party years. I'm going to start being a mom. And I did that. And it wasn't like I didn't spend my party years having a hell of a lot of fun. I mean, I was a stripper. Stripper is fun. I had my fun. And then we had kids, and kids were awesome. Babies are the most addictive thing on this earth. I'm very convinced. Like, babies are amazing. And then all of a sudden he changed. It didn't happen overnight. It wasn't all of a sudden, but he definitely changed. And he went from being this hot, amazing, wonderful alpha guy that was super exciting and super sexy to, you know, just not him anymore. And I didn't really know what to make of that. He wasn't as exciting. He wasn't as fun. He didn't want to spend time with me as much. He was kind of depressed and he was struggling with a lot of things. And then he started gaining weight and he couldn't seem to keep the weight off. It just started happening and there it was. And I didn't know what was going on, and he didn't know what was going on either, but he didn't talk to me about it because he was trying to figure it out himself. And so he kind of closed inward and started shutting me out. And I was so hurt. And I started going on the internet looking for explanations about what was going on. And I found the usual, well, you know, you've probably just exited the honeymoon phase. That's all. You know, everybody goes through that. You'll get over it. You know, this is very normal. Just calm down. And so I told myself, this is very normal. This is what marriage is. Just calm down, you know? And so I tried to do that. I tried to calm down and I tried to stop panicking that something was wrong because this is normal. Everything's fine. And the years went by, and I'm not going to talk in too much detail about the ways it affected his personality. It was a brain tumor. It was in his pituitary gland. It affected the production of hormones. It caused some hormones to spike in his system and, you know, raise to very unusual levels. It caused other hormones to drop off significantly. Brain tumors do that. So while it wasn't like a cancerous brain tumor that was making him alarmingly ill, it made him tired and fatigued and grumpy, and he wasn't the man I married. He was still a good man, a very good man, and definitely a man worth being married to, but he wasn't the man I married, and our relationship suffered. That lasted for anywhere from 5 to 7 years before we discovered that it was a brain tumor causing his issues. A lot of it we assumed was just stress because life is stressful. We had a lot of bills to pay and things were tough and things were hard. We had small children we had to feed and clothe and shelter, and he had to work insane hours to support the family, which he did because he's a very strong man and a very resilient man, and he went and did the strong, resilient thing. And I was horribly lonely and I missed him. Even though he was right next to me, I missed him. And I didn't understand why. And again, I went on the internet and I looked up what's going on. Why do I feel so disenchanted with my marriage? And what I got was, well, you're out of the honeymoon phase, so, you know, this is normal. Just relax and everything's going to be okay. And so I told myself, this is all normal. Everything's going to be okay. And years passed, year after year after year, and we grew more and more distant. And I still loved him, and I still admired him, but he wasn't the man I married. So then we found out last year, I think I had just turned 35, or maybe I was still 34. We found out that it was a brain tumor causing all these problems. And the doctors were like, this is good because there's a pill that we can give you that's going to shrink that brain tumor down. It's not a large tumor, it's just a little teeny one, and it's just in the right spot in your pituitary gland. So if we shrink that down with this pill, you're going to be okay. And sure enough, they gave him the pill, and it was like a miracle. Overnight, he was my husband again. He was that man. Yeah, he'd gained a lot of weight because the hormonal changes caused him to gain lots of weight, but he went to a gym and he started working out, and he's starting to lose the weight now, and he's got so much more energy, and he wants to spend time with me all of a sudden. And I read stories on the internet because once we knew it was a brain tumor, we found other people who'd had similar issues, and they were talking about how it was like falling in love with their husband all over again. It was just so wonderful. And for me, it just wasn't like that. I felt very distant from him, and I felt very separate from him. And I would go to work, and I found myself just hoping that maybe someday, somehow, I'd meet someone special and fall in love and leave my family. And so, once again, I really wish I had a copy of Rollo Tomasi's timeline so that I could see where on that timeline I fall, because it's at about this time in a woman's life that she starts getting bored with her pathetic beta husband that she settled for, and starts wanting to go out and find that healthy, sexy alpha man who's exciting and fun. I'm at that stage, I think. I'm at that age range, and I'm sitting here going, okay, well, this is interesting because over the last year, I found myself fantasizing about finding someone new. And I mean, I've mentioned it in previous videos, I'm bisexual. I wouldn't mind finding a woman. I think that would be really cool. I've found myself on multiple occasions over the last several months hoping that I just find someone exciting and fun and kind of sexy. And I know that's a bad thing. And so I finally went into therapy, partially because of postpartum depression, but partially because a lot of that postpartum depression, kind of centered around the fact that I just felt like I couldn't be with my husband anymore, and I didn't understand why. And so then the question immediately becomes, well, are you falling into Rollo Tomasi's timeline? And I really wish I had a copy of the timeline so that I could see what he's written about this stage of the game, because I'd be really curious to see it. But the thing is, I'm not on the normal timeline. I never was. And so even though I'm lining up with that timeline almost perfectly in this particular regard, is it because of hypergamy, or is it because my husband had a brain tumor and I already had massive trust issues? And that's what I discovered in therapy yesterday. Like, it's not a discovery, but it was something that she finally kind of laid out for me, and she wasn't telling me anything I didn't already know, but it was like when she hit me with it, it was a dose of truth, and that's not always the most pleasant thing. It's like being doused with cold water. I have massive trust issues. I've always had massive trust issues, and the only person that I've ever met that I've ever let pass that wall was my husband. Because he was not bothered by me, by who I am as a woman with bipolar disorder and hyperthymia, so I'm a lot for somebody to handle. I'm a little bit much to deal with. He wasn't bothered by that. He wasn't afraid of me, and that was the really funny thing. Like, deep down, I think when people get to know me well enough, I'm always very sure that they're going to be afraid of me, because it's a lot, and it can be, I think the word my therapist used was intimidating. It can be intimidating to deal with me when I'm kind of in full swing and doing my thing. I was trying to think of how to explain it for this video, and I was like, it's like going to bed with a wild animal. Everybody wants someone who's a little wild in the sack, but not everybody wants to go to bed with a fucking wild animal. And my husband, he can handle it. Most men don't want that. Most people don't want that. And that's why he's so special. He actually likes me. In fact, he loves me. And that's an amazing thing. And that's why I married him, because you just don't find a guy like that every day. But now I'm 35 and I want to get away from him. And the reason I want to get away from him is because he had a brain tumor and he changed and he started withdrawing into himself. And he kind of pushed me out. And I felt horribly rejected after a lifetime of rejection. And it hurt. And it lasted for, anywhere from 5 to 7 years. And during that time, I kept on telling myself, it's okay, this is normal, even though it was very clearly not normal. And now that he's back, and now that he's him again, it's wonderful, but a part of me just doesn't want to relax. A part of me is frightened, and a part of me is hurt, and a part of me wants to run away and find someone new and build something new, because maybe new will be safer than this. Basically, to make a long story short, I need to tell that part of me to shut the fuck up. Because he's an amazing man and a wonderful man, and it's not like he asked to have a brain tumor. And so, I think this is really interesting. It's hard, it's kind of painful to talk about, but it's interesting, and so I feel like I need to share it with you guys. I'm on the timeline too. But the solution to my problem is not, oh, well, hypergamy is just pulling you in this direction, don't pay attention to it. And maybe hypergamy is playing into it. God knows. In fact, I would agree with Tomasi that hypergamy does play into it in this situation as well. And here's how. A part of me is really freaked out because that part of me that's like, you need to find something new that's going to be safe. Because I want to be safe. Deep down inside, I just want to feel safe. I've been hurting for years. I've been lonely and sad for years. And I haven't wanted to leave my husband because I know he's a wonderful man and he's a wonderful dad to my kids. But at the same time, I just want to feel safe. I just want to feel loved. As much as that is a dangerous thing to say on the internet, because it's an extremely vulnerable thing to say on the internet. And God knows I probably shouldn't be saying that on the internet because you can't take it down once it gets to the internet. That being said, it's kind of important because he's not some boring beta male that I got tired of. I feel betrayed. And I don't feel betrayed through any fault on his part. He didn't ask to have a brain tumor. And right now, I suppose it's a good thing that I've been very doggedly hanging on to the marriage, and he has offered to divorce me after we found out about the brain tumor. I don't know if I've mentioned this in any of my videos. He told me he wanted a divorce because he knew that I had been unhappy in the marriage for years, and once the medication started working and the brain tumor started clearing up, he realized that he hadn't been himself for years, and that I had married one man and ended up stuck in a marriage with a different man for years. And he wanted me to be happy, and he said, I think we should get a divorce. I'll take over the finances. I'll take care of the kids. You go and you build yourself a new life. And I told him no. And he offered me that arrangement on multiple occasions in the first couple months after discovering the brain tumor and getting on the medication, and just that realization started to sink in that it had affected our marriage extremely, like a lot. And I've always talked about him very glowingly in my videos, and I will continue to do so. He's an extraordinary man, like genuinely an extraordinary human being. But there was a while there where it kind of started to sink in, like, oh my God, I've spent 5 years, anywhere from 7 to 5 years, feeling incredibly lonely in my marriage. So the majority of my marriage was quite lonely and quite difficult. And there were a lot of little details, a lot of little things, like a lot of little ways that his personality shifted. I used to get so angry because I would get these comments from guys on the internet who were like, if your husband suddenly lost his job, you'd leave him. Or if your husband, suddenly gained a bunch of weight, you'd leave him. Or if your husband, I don't know, if your husband changed in some way here, some little way or there, something superficial, how much money he earns or how good he looks or something superficial like that. If that changed, you'd leave him in a heartbeat. And what they didn't know was that his entire personality changed. And I stuck with him for years. I love him. Very much, deeply, deeply love him. But it's been painful. And it was extremely painful for him. Like, don't let me downplay in any way the amount of suffering that he's gone through as a result of this. It's been incredibly hard for him, but it's been really hard for me too. And the recovery process has been rough because I do have trust issues, and I've struggled extremely to open myself back up to him because I just don't want to be hurt again. And so then I'm going to therapy, and then she's like, oh, by the way, you have bipolar disorder. And it's like, it's been one of those, it never rains, it pours kinds of situations. But I think I was trying to mention this. My phone shut down for a minute, and I don't want to lose this thought. And everything's scrambled because, of course, it is. My thinking is scrambled. It's one of the reasons I write. I can finally organize my thoughts when I'm writing. When I'm talking, they're just disorganized, and I'm doing my very best to fix that. But that's actually, apparently, that's a symptom of bipolar disorder. So I thought that was really interesting when I read it. They call it tangential thinking. Anyway, the way that my situation lines up with Tomasi's timeline is when I started thinking, I want to find somebody else. I just don't feel like I can hang on to the marriage after this. I don't know if I can ever trust him again. Immediately it was like, oh my God, I'm not as young as I used to be. I'm not as hot as I used to be. I'm not as sexy as I used to be. How am I going to attract a good man? And suddenly I was at the hitting the wall phase, only I was 35 instead of 28, which hurt even more because it's like, oh shit, maybe I had a shot in hell at the age of 28, but I sure as hell don't have a shot in hell at the age of 35. And on top of that, I've got 4 kids. Who's going to want to date me? And then I'm looking around me and seeing other guys who are, close to my age. And these are the guys who are my age. That's not even counting the fact that I'm probably going to have to add 5 to 10 years into my dating pool of men, because guys my age aren't going to want to date me. They're going to want to date someone a little younger than me, like, a 28-year-old. And I'm looking around at these guys, and they're all just kind of, they definitely are not impressing me. I mean, I've been spoiled. I got to marry super hot alpha dude at the age of 23. These guys that I'm seeing who are in my age range, it's like, well, he's not a catch. I wonder what else is out there. It was, and I hated the fact that I was even looking at other men in that way, because it's like, dude, what are you doing? What are you doing? By the way, I mentioned in one of my videos that I was being sexually harassed by a coworker, and that I finally had to file like a sexual harassment claim against him, and it was a big mess. This guy, I wasn't hitting on him. I wasn't pursuing him. He knew that I was married because we worked together all day long. Like, we all worked together as a team. And so he knew I was married. He knew I had kids. The reason the sexual harassment thing came about was because he realized that I was not receptive to his advances, and he was trying to get me fired. That's the short version. I started to have a problem with him trying to get me in trouble at work. We all everybody sort of just joked and laughed about it because everybody knew that it was a thing. Like, all my coworkers knew it was a thing. I think they even knew it was a thing before I knew it was a thing, but yeah, it wasn't me hitting on him because I was trying to quietly undermine my marriage or subconsciously undermine my marriage, and then him thinking that it was serious or anything like that. That didn't happen. I was not remotely attracted to this guy at all. But no, I mean, that was months after that happened. Like, that's when I started, like, looking around. Like, there's got to be someone out there for me. And number one, there isn't. There just isn't. There's never going to be anybody that I want to be with as much as I want to be with my husband. And number two, I'm too old. Like, I've got 4 kids. No one's going to want to date me. And honestly, the people who are going to want to date me, I'm not going to want to date them. Because, let's be honest, even with bipolar disorder, I still have my shit together. More than a lot of these people do. And the people who have their shit together enough to be interesting to me, they're not going to want to date me because they have their shit together more than I do. And that's the sad thing. Like, that's the dilemma of being older and being in the dating market. My in-laws, both of them were widowed and ended up finding one another and getting together. But, you know, I feel sorry for people who are young and widowed because it's hard to find somebody because, you know, you're widowed. It's not like you asked your partner to die and then you go out in the dating market and everybody else is, you know, kind of screwy. They've got some baggage behind them. But that's the problem. There's just so many people with baggage. It's like you meet every person and immediately have to ask, okay, what's wrong with you? You meet another person, what's wrong with you? Like, I can't imagine entering the dating market. And so then it was like, well, maybe I'm just going to have to be alone. And that was a terrifying thought too. And so I've been kind of stuck in this maelstrom. I had a panic attack at work yesterday, which was kind of a good thing and kind of a bad thing. Like, I managed to handle it just fine. You know, it was almost time for me to go on break, so I'm sitting there and I'm holding my chest and I was like, hey, I'm just gonna step outside for my 15, all right? See you guys. I was having a panic attack, and then immediately after that I went to my therapist and she was like, okay, well, obviously you've got some problems going on right now, so do you want to talk about it? And I mean, we needed to have that serious discussion, and I think I came in originally for therapy expecting to have that serious discussion on, like, you know, therapy session number 1 or 2, possibly even as late as therapy session number 3, but it's taken us a few months to get there. And now that we're there, I'm like, you know, I'm happy we've had that discussion because it's been waiting to happen. I have trust issues. I've got major trust issues. And I need to stop thinking, okay, well, can I find someone new and maybe build a new life that's going to be safe, and just accept the fact that this is as safe as I'm ever going to be. It's not because he's boring. And the way all of this is relevant to you guys, because I made this video to give you information that would be relevant to you, not just to, you know, talk about my own problems ad nauseum. It is that NAWALT kind of situation. Not all women are like that. I'm in the same situation as a lot of women where it's like, well, you know, maybe I should go out and chase alpha guys. Except that doesn't work. And it's not because I got bored. It's because I got hurt. Instead of just looking at it like, well, you know, all women are like this, because that's not a helpful way to look at it. It's much more productive and useful to look at it as well as an individual. I have trust issues, and I need to work on those trust issues, and I need to spend time with my husband, and I need to work on rebuilding our relationship so that it can be strong and healthy again. And that's really all it's going to take, which is a lot and not that much at all at the same time. I think sometimes it can be very easy to oversimplify women. It can be very easy to say, oh, well, all women are going to be prone to this. And maybe we are just a little bit prone to this, because God knows I'm in that category. I'm falling into that pattern. You know, maybe I should just go out and find Mr. Fun and Exciting, and that's not what I ultimately want at all. I'm afraid, and I'm hurt. And so, of course, I'm withdrawing. which is not so good for my relationship with my husband, who is, let's face it, Mr. Wonderful, Fun, and Exciting. It's not as simple. When you're actually in the situation and you're actually there and you're actually looking at your life and saying, well, why am I looking for someone else? Even at a subconscious level, even in the most primitive level, why am I finding myself looking around, hoping that somewhere around the corner I'm going to find somebody who's fun? Why am I doing that? It's because I'm hurt. It's not because of hypergamy. It's not because I'm being drawn to spend those last eggs on some alpha seed. That could be happening under the surface, deep, deep, deep down subconsciously. And honestly, I would not be surprised if there isn't that element going on, even though I don't ever want to be pregnant again, because this last pregnancy has done a lot to me. It's done way more to me than I ever wanted it to. Every pregnancy affects your body differently, and this one's been a whopper. I don't ever want to be pregnant again. But some part of me, the instinctive animalistic part, is probably looking at it and saying, you know what, we could use that one last hurrah of excitement and sexuality to just make sure that these last couple eggs, they get out the door in the right kind of way. That is entirely possible. But ultimately, the thing that's driving my behavior at this time is not hypergamy. Hypergamy is, if anything, a very, very soft, under the surface, subtle whisper that I can't even consciously hear. It's the hurt. It's the pain. It's the years of feeling rejected and unloved and misunderstood and unaccepted. It's all of that. And it's all of the rejection that I had before I met my husband as well. Like, I thought I was a moderately well-adjusted person, and I need to make a video, and I will be doing that in the near future, on why you shouldn't date crazy people and why ultimately you can't avoid dating crazy people. Because I thought I was pretty sane. Turns out I was wrong, and I had no way of knowing. But it's all of that. It's me as a human being, as a complex entity with a very complex brain. I need to work with that. I need to work with those parts of myself. I don't need to look at my instincts and my hypergamy and say, oh, I'm driven to find alpha seed. I've got my alpha seed at home, thank you. I've had so much of that. I've been pregnant 7 times. I've definitely had a lot of that alpha seed. I just want to feel safe. Safe is good. And safe is something I'm going to have to generate with him, because it takes time to recover from damage to a relationship. And that's time that I am more than happy to put in. And that's time that he's more than happy to give me, because he's an amazing and wonderful man, and he realizes I've been through a lot, and he's being very patient with me and very loving to me. Like, I can't begin to tell you guys how very patient and loving he's been. I've needed his love and I've needed his support, and he's giving it to me, which is awesome. So that's it. That's my thinking at the moment. I really wish I had a copy of that timeline. Maybe I'll find it at some point. I know I've got the book around here somewhere. I thought I was organized. Obviously, I'm not. I'm on the timeline. I actually found a way that I fit onto the timeline, and it is hitting me at that same time, in that same time frame. So that's an interesting thing. And one of the things that he's talked about that, really it motivated him to go and seek treatment, because he's too young to have some of the problems that he was having. He went out and he looked for a treatment because he saw how much I was suffering and how distant I was growing with him toward the end. And he realized that our marriage wasn't going to survive if he kept on being the way he was with that brain tumor. And so he found it, and he got treatment, and he did all that on his own, which is, it's awesome. It's really wonderful that he did that. If he hadn't done that, eventually I would be at that place in Tomasi's timeline, without knowledge that it was a brain tumor, without any way of suspecting that it was a brain tumor, going, I just don't feel satisfied in my marriage. I'm just not happy. I think I just need to leave, which would have been horrible because we've got 4 kids. um, for very young children that we want to have, we want to give them the best start in life possible. And really the best way to do that, statistically speaking, is by being married to, your partner, their other parent. Yeah, it would have been a disaster. And as it is, it's still very difficult, but we're holding it together. Very quickly, let me just say this, because a lot of guys are always talking about how, well, if she's thinking about leaving, she's having an affair. You can just guarantee it. You can bet your last dollar on it. She's already having an affair if she's thinking about leaving. Dude, I was not having an affair. I was hoping for someone special to show up, and here's the really interesting thing about this. I was emotionally withdrawn from the relationship. I was hoping for someone special to show up, and I was considering at one point divorce, because I thought that would open me up to somebody special, where it would be like, if I find someone, then I don't have to worry about all the messiness of an affair, because I'll be single and I'll be ready for that person. I found that part of myself, and it was like, well, this is very bad. It's very bad for a relationship. But anyway, that's pretty much it. I need to edit this video and get it out to you guys. And I need to do more book reviews, because I want to do more book reviews, but I thought that this would be interesting. Anyway, for now, I think this is it. I'll talk to you guys later.